This episode is brought to you by Good Life Nutrition, developed by athletes like you. Whether you are looking for race day nutrition, daily electrolytes, or your daily protein, Good Life Nutrition has you covered. Built on science and backed by common sense, it's why professional athletes like Ben Canute, Jason West, and many others have made the switch. Enjoy 25% off your first order by using promo code Slowtwitch. Just go to fuelyourgoodlife.com and use promo code Slowtwitch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slowtwitch podcast. My name's Kevin McKinnon. I'm here with Slowtwitch's Eric Wynn and Ben Snyder-McGrath, and a very special guest today, Matthew Marquardt, a pro triathlete. And, well, Matt does a whole pile of different things that we will get into. And Matt, thanks so much for joining us. And Eric and Ben, how are things going? You guys good?
We're
Doing
great,
well.
man. We've spent 20 minutes catching up and we're ready to go.
That is a veiled innuendo about me having technical problems and being late to the show here. So I do apologize. But hey, if you have to chat with anyone, it might as well be Matthew Marquardt, right? So I'm not going to feel too guilty on this front.
Very true.
Matt, obviously great to have you here and lots to talk about, or lots that we want to talk about. But I was thinking that it would be great for those who maybe aren't as familiar with your background and all that kind of stuff. If you could just tell us a little bit, um, you know, I'll sort of throw things out first. You're a very unlikely pro triathlete. You also happen to be a med student. You finished the World Championships, and I think went into your first residency rotation like a few days afterwards, right?
Yeah, so I'm a I'm a professional Ironman triathlete, and then I'm also a medical student at Ohio State University. And I also, and kind of my future goal is to be a head and neck cancer surgeon. And so, yeah, I finished, just actually timing, I guess, was just perfect where the weekend before school started was the World Championships. And so was able to do Nice and then basically got back on a plane as soon as I could. And then the Wednesday after the race, I was on my psychiatry rotations. Um, so, keeps things busy, keeps things interesting. I don't mind it too much. I think I'm kind of used to it at this point. And it's just kind of the small price you pay to be able to kind of live the life that I've been living, which has been really great the past couple of years.
Um, so can you maybe let's just go back a little bit and even just talk about your background and how you got into the sport.
Yeah, so I guess I'm starting to have been in the sport for a longer period of time, but I grew up mainly playing soccer, lacrosse, and swimming, and then track and cross country were the things that I did growing up. And in high school, it was clear that swimming was going to be my sport in college, and I ended up going to Princeton University where I swam there, specialized in backstroke and butterfly. And then kind of when I graduated, my senior swim season was canceled because of COVID, and kind of was just looking for something to do, just to train for and stay in shape. And so decided to sign up for a half Ironman, and one race led to another, led to another, led to being a pro. And here we are. So it's been a very unconventional, unintentional path, but also, I guess, very intentional at the same time. And it's been a very fun journey throughout. And yeah, so I started triathlon in 2021 was kind of my first official race. And I did kind of a half season in 2021. And then in 2022, I raced the whole season as an age grouper. And we certainly could talk about that decision because I could have taken my pro card earlier, but decided not to. Um, Raced 2022 as an age grouper, won the overall title at Kona as an age grouper, and then converted to be a pro in 2023. And so I've done 3 seasons as a pro now, which has been pretty awesome. So
So 2022, was that when you came fourth overall at Eagleman? Was that in
Yeah.
2021?
So in 2022, I think what if I were to go back, I was 10th overall, including the pros at Ironman Texas, fourth overall at Eagleman, fourth overall at Ironman Lake Placid, and then I like won the age group at Kona and got third in my age group at 70.3 Worlds was that season. So it was a pretty fun season. You know,
Yeah, well,
uh,
and those were okay results. Like, you know,
yeah, it was interesting though. Like I mean, I wouldn't have done it any differently, but like it was interesting to kind of be an age grouper, but also be in a position where you could have been making money. But like at the end of the day, my goal that year was like fully focused on Kona, and I really wanted to try and win a title as an age grouper in Kona, and so that's a big part of the reason why I kind of waited to take my pro card. And thankfully that all worked out. So I have a bowl from being a age grouper, which
yeah.
it made as one does, it just collects knickknacks at this point and stuff like that. So
My wife won her age group at the Worlds in 2022 as well. So
oh,
so you guys weren't on the stage at the same time, but the same stage that
hmm.
same night anyway. And yeah, hers sits on the piano downstairs and doesn't quite collect knickknacks, but it looks pretty good. Uh, Much nicer than my second place plaque from the dark ages way back. So they've definitely improved on the awards. Um, so I guess at that point, were you at Princeton still, or had you started med school, or when did med
Yes.
school come into the picture?
So it really was pretty much that I started med school and I started triathlon at the same time, which is kind of a crazy thing to say. I graduated from Princeton in May of 2021, which is when I did Gulf Coast, and then my second ever 70.3 was the at St. George 2021 World Champs, which was 6 weeks into med school. So like originally, like I qualified for 70.3 Worlds as an age grouper, and I think pretty much everyone else thought, okay, like there's no way I can do both at during med school. And at that point I was pretty I'd made peace, I think, with no longer being an elite athlete. And I was kind of ready to move on and start this next chapter of my life, which was medical school, and just fully focus on that. I didn't necessarily have the craving to continue to be an athlete. But like when I got the slot for 70.3 Worlds, I was like, you know what, I might as well do it and see how it goes. And I was like, 6 weeks isn't that hard to balance, two different things. Like, I can certainly do that. And then I went to 70.3 Worlds and got second in my age group. And that was when like the big decision had to be made, which is, okay, like, do I just become a normal med student or do I like give this a shot? Because while yes, I had done well as an age grouper, um, I think I was still like 30 or 35 minutes behind Gustav at least, if not a little bit more than that. And so like there wasn't necessarily like it wasn't clear that I was going to have the success that I had had, and triathlon takes a ton of time, and so it's like, okay, is the trade-off of spending all this time working out and everything worth it compared to being able to spend time on extracurriculars and things like that. And I talked to a bunch of mentors kind of that fall, and the overall advice was like, hey, if you can be successful in this, that this will kind of take you further than any research project or anything like that that you could ever do, because in medicine we're constantly looking to kind of try and understand what defines excellence, what predicts excellence, and we've really not been able to find anything other than prior experience, prior success. So that means like being a collegiate athlete, being a concert level pianist, being a renowned author, like with the idea being that, hey, becoming good at no one's inherently good at medicine. Um, it's something that's learned and trained. And so if you have the skills and the life lessons to have been successful in something else, you can then translate that to medicine. So anyways, that's a long story, long way of saying that basically the advice was to give it a shot and see how it goes, which was very much what happened in 2022. Just was going to do one season and see how that went. And obviously that season went pretty well. And so then that led to another season, has led to another season. So, um, Yeah, I mean, really, at no point have I really ever planned more than maybe 6 to 12 months at a time throughout this kind of entire career because there's always medical school is constantly changing as you're going through, and no one's done people have been elite athletes before, but while being in medical school, but the thing is that, like, there aren't really many sports that require as much time as triathlon does, especially being a full distance specialist, and so kind of I've pretty much been figuring out things as I've gone along, and there's all these different inflection points, checkpoints along as you go where it's like, hey, I don't know if I can continue to do it past this point because like the expectations ramp up or like your free time goes down, things like that. But so far we've figured out a way to make it work time and time again. Um, so you just never know. You never know, and I've certainly surprised myself throughout this whole journey about what's possible versus not. So that's also been really cool.
I was
One of the guys who raced oh, sorry, go ahead.
sorry. Well, you mentioned the long course side of it all, and I was just curious. Like you were swimming, like shorter events. So why
Mhm.
did you? What drew you to the longer stuff in triathlon?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up, we've kind of always known that I've had like a quote unquote engine. And the reason why I was really kind of better at backstroke and butterfly is that have a really strong kick. And I was really good at underwaters. And so in those two distances and strokes, like you can really leverage the underwaters, and that's why I was good at those events. Um, and then certainly there was a question of like, okay, do I do Olympic, kind of Olympic path versus Ironman when I started out, and for a variety of different reasons. Like I'm a good I'm a good runner, but I'm not a great runner. And that was kind of the biggest thing was that my coach in particular identified early on that like the bike could really be a strong suit for me. And so it's like, okay, well, why are you going to focus on something where the bike is basically like a moot point because of the rules and the drafting and everything. And so that was a big part of the reason too of like why I did Ironman was because like I could really leverage my swim, my bike, and my run instead of just like you know work hard for what an hour and 20 minutes and then run super fast, which is basically what the Olympic thing
Hmm.
distance is in a simplification. So, yeah, that was kind of the whole. But everyone always asks me, they're like, are you going to do the Olympics? I was like, no, it's like completely different.
Yeah. That was my next
Like
question.
completely
I don't know
different.
anything. I don't know anything about triathlon, so that was my next question.
Yeah. Are you gearing up for LA? Um, so I just wanted one question. So one of the guys who raced on the national team with my son in cycling was also in med school and he took a bunch of years off. And the I'm trying to remember which Olympics was. It was 2016 Olympics coincided. Like he was able to do that, and then he basically said, "I have to go back to school now because they won't let me take any more years off." Is that like something that would be a consideration for you? Like you can, in theory, be a
Yeah, so,
doctor
so there's
anytime. You can't be a pro
right.
triathlete.
Yeah, no, I've certainly for me in particular, I also have a really strong interest in research. And so that is one way that that's actually a big way that I've been able to race as much as I have. Is that I've kind of added some additional research time to my medical school career. And during those research blocks in particular, I have a super supportive mentor that lets me go off and race. And so, it's never full time off because I also don't really think that's a good thing for me to do. But like it gives me a lot more flexibility to kind of, uh, in some ways, kind of come to and from like the clinical side of things and intersperse some research in there. And so it will end up taking me a little bit longer to graduate med school than the average student. But like it's enabled me to kind of pursue these two other passions of mine, which is like cancer research as well as triathlon. So it's been a really good, I guess, compromise
Yeah.
um, you know, throughout. So yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing I'm not the only one who on this is saying, okay, how on earth do you fit all of this stuff in? Like what
It's
does
called
a typical day or typical week look like?
It's called youth, Kevin.
Oh, here we go. Eric's got to be like, you're so old, man. You can't even remember how all this stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to, I think, priorities and that really focusing on what's most important in your life and then making time and making way for those things. And so, certainly there are some very early mornings at times, as well as some later nights. But I think one of the most important things in medicine is to have things outside of medicine that you can pursue, and kind of be able to step away from medicine as a way to kind of de-stress as well as cope with a lot of the things that happen in it. And so triathlon's very much provided me with this kind of other thing. And when I do triathlon, I'm doing triathlon. When I'm training, I'm training. And when I'm doing medicine, I'm doing medicine. Um, and
You seem very focused, very strategic with your day,
yeah,
and very like, to your point, I think what you were going to say before I interrupted you, very segmented.
yeah,
Like following you for the last year on social, one of the things I probably enjoy the most is when you talk about your time block schedule
yeah.
and just how you get everything done. And I've never seen you talk about watching television
Yeah, no, I very rarely
on
do.
those. Yeah.
No, I
Yeah,
in
the way I say it, like kind of one of my mottos is that I think structure gives you freedom. Is I think a really good way to think of it. In that, when you have a structure to your day and to your week, that kind of takes off some of the mental load and also makes your time a lot more efficient and gives you then freedom to do other things when the structure allows for it. And so I think that's a super super important part of like how I go through life. And yeah, no, being very focused is important. And I do watch some TV or videos with my significant other, but I've never really found TV entertaining in and of itself. Like it's like very much a thing that I do with Sarah versus like just wanting to watch it on my own. So
And that's scheduled in, and that's part of the structured Sarah time. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I've tried not to, like, get to the point where, like, I have to, like, put on the calendar, like, time with Sarah or whatnot. I try to avoid that, but it's certainly, like,
yeah,
up
that would
for
be a
me.
good thing to avoid.
At this time block during the day, like, I try not to do other things.
So, and and obviously, Slowtwitch, people care about training and stuff. How many hours a day are you getting in training? How does that sort of block work for you in your week and in your day?
Yeah, so, truthfully, I don't really know what that many other triathletes do. I post a lot, but I try not to consume on social media as best as I can. But over like for me, it's around 20 to 25 hours of training a week is kind of what we built up to. When I first started, it was more like 15 to 17. And as you kind of get fitter and as I've kind of figured out a way to fit everything into my life, we've been able to slowly build that up to 20 to 25 hours over the past 4-ish years. So you certainly don't get there just overnight because like if I had started at 20 to 25, I guarantee you I would have gotten injured. I would have just been way too exhausted all the time. I wouldn't have recovered from training sessions. But now that there's kind of that base that's built up over years, I can very much absorb 20 to 25 hours. And then there will be some times at specific points in the season where I get closer to 30, but, like, if I had to guess, there was probably maybe only 1 or 2 weeks out of all of last year where I was somewhere between 29 and 31 hours. And so it's really kind of focused on making sure that the sessions are as high quality as possible. In volume, certainly, I do respond well to volume, and so like Saturday in particular is often a pretty long day, somewhere between I'd say 5 and 7 hours of training, depending on kind of where we're at in the season. But most days it's kind of like an hour to an hour and a half in the morning before I kind of go into the hospital or if I'm doing research, start my research. And then in the afternoon, it's somewhere between, I'd say, an hour and a half and 3 hours, depending on what day of the week it is, and what the session is. So, in general, we're kind of looking at 2.5 to 4 hours of training during weekdays. And then weekends, you're kind of pushing, 5 to 7 on Saturday, and then probably another 4 to 5 on Sunday. Which honestly is probably pretty similar to a lot of age groupers where they probably load a lot more of their stuff on the weekends when they can. But I
Yeah.
think the most important thing is I give like a ton of my success to my coach.
Who is
Because
your coach?
so my coach is Andrew Yoder, and I've been with him like since the beginning, and we have a super good relationship where basically I tell him like, okay, these are the number of hours I have at these different points in the week. He writes the sessions, I do them, and then I don't really think about them beyond that,
Mm.
which is kind of how I wanted it from the beginning, because I kind of had a relationship like that with a coach growing up with swimming, where like I was fully bought in, and just whatever he did, I said, or sorry, whatever he said, I did. And then in college, my coach had a little bit more laissez-faire approach where it was like, oh, like, what workout do you want to do today? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, and so when I started triathlon, well, actually in college, I was like, oh, well, whatever is the hardest, like, just give me the hardest thing every day. And obviously that's not necessarily the best training style. And so when I started triathlon, I was very intentional of like, okay, I want to like have a coach that can just write things and I'll do them, and that I don't think about triathlon that much outside of the sessions. Also, I just don't have the bandwidth to. Like I don't have the bandwidth to analyze a session or think about it or think about what my workout's going to be for the week. And so very much it's like, okay, like what's on the docket for tomorrow, and figure out how to fit it in, and go do it, and send some comments and then move on. So yeah.
You must be like, how do you are you able to sleep just like if I told you to go to sleep right now, could you be asleep in 5 minutes? Because I mean, it's obviously so
Um
important.
like, yeah, pretty much for the most. Um, People ask me that all the time, especially like if I've done a day in my life reel where like where I'm up training till 8 or 8:30, and then I say I'm in bed by 9 or 9:15, and like if if anything you see on a day in a life reel, it's real and it actually happened on that day.
Mhm.
Some people combine different days together or make an idealized version. I try very much to stick with like, okay, this is what actually happened. Um, and yeah, so it's like there are some nights where like I have a very fast turnaround, and when you've done as much as I do in a day, you're generally pretty exhausted by the end of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Eh,
Random
um,
question. Talk to us a little bit about like what you normally eat during a day. Like,
yeah. Um
because it seems like you meal prep quite a
yeah,
bit.
I do to different extents, kind of depending on I think how exhausted I am.
Mm.
But it's definitely I think changed over the years to be a lot more if you were to look at it, I think the easiest way to kind of imagine things is like take, a recommend not getting into politics, but a previously recommended properly balanced diet of macros.
sure.
If you take that and then basically like the additional calories that I need from all the training that I've done, basically all that's carbs. So um, that's like I think the simplest way to think of it. And so it's a very carb heavy diet overall because I'm doing so much aerobic work, and like carbs are your fuel for that. So it ends up being, a lot of pasta, a lot of bread, a lot of jam and honey, types things like that. Some days I try to eat whole foods as much as I can, but sometimes like you have to go for the protein shake or whatnot, or some very very simple um, type of a meal, because like I just don't have the time, and sometimes I don't have the energy. So, um, but yeah, no, it's kind of like I don't know. Breakfast is probably some bread and jam or bread and honey with a protein shake. Then lunch, I often kind of do um, like some chicken, rice, and veggies. I think is probably the simplest way to explain it. And then dinner will kind of be pasta. Sometimes I'll like make pizza, but use very little cheese, so it's so that there's not too much fat or things like that. So um, yeah, it's definitely I think. a lot more carbs than I ever expected to be eating
Mm.
as an elite athlete.
In terms of racing, like I felt like 2024 was a big breakthrough year for you. But maybe 2025 was even more. Like, there's a few podiums in 2024, and we figured you were gunning after the Ironman Pro Series. You were right in that mix for a long time. But then 2025 comes with two Ironman titles. So, um, how do you evaluate last year and compare it to 2024?
Yeah, no, I certainly think that whenever I look at a season, I actually really look at not necessarily the results, but almost more how things went from a training standpoint. Because what really drives me more than anything else in the sport is kind of the continuous improvement and the ability to get better and see myself progress. Um, and so I feel like 2025 was a year where I saw really big improvements in training, and that was what made, I think, the first part of the season so frustrating, kind of with the cramping and not the best results at Texas and at St. George, was because like I had done this really phenomenal off season of training and I wanted to be able to express that to the world. And then to like have these debilitating cramps that basically took me out of the race before it started was really frustrating. And then so, it was like two very different seasons within the season of like the first, part I got like 15th and 15th, and then I won cans and won Placid and got eighth at Worlds. And so that was obviously like a really awesome season. And it was a bummer that I kind of had a little bit of an injury at Cozumel, but I was really looking forward to that because I think that that would have been a very fast race, which would have been cool. Because normally I kind of am attracted to more challenging races that might not necessarily be the quote unquote fastest, because I think that that suits me better, kind of my strengths across the board. But Cozumel, I think, would have been fun just to go really, really fast and see how low I could get that time.
Mhm.
You mentioned the cramping, and we talked about this a little bit in Nice as well. Trying to did you get that stuff all figured out? Have you, or like because you were talking, you felt like it was a muscle or nerve issue more than anything nutrition wise or whatever.
Yeah, so one of, I think, the biggest disappointments at Cozumel was not being able to actually test out each of these races has given us data in terms of figuring, we're testing different things basically with each race and seeing if improvements are being made on the cramping front. And I felt like Cozumel, I felt confident that Cozumel would have been the race where I didn't cramp it anymore. So that was definitely a bummer. So we will have to wait until, this season to be able to authoritatively say if I've fixed the problem or not. And I generally like not to like provide hypotheses until I actually know the answer. Not that I'm trying to cop out, but I think I've thought that I had the answer a lot of times this year, and that's not been the case. And if you're just guessing, I don't really think that that helps anyone because I know a lot of people have reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have like a similar problem. Like, can you let me know like when you figure it out?" And I don't want to lead people astray, but I think we're making progress, and we will see if we've actually made progress or not in 2026. So
Well, speaking of 2026, what does the race schedule look like for you this year?
yeah, oh my gosh, I'm just giving you all the like, up in the air answers, aren't I? So I'm doing Cape Epic. So my, the fun thing that I'm doing is I'm racing Cape Epic, which for of you that don't know, it's an 8-day mountain biking race in South Africa. That's really kind of like the pinnacle of multi-day stage racing for mountain biking. I'm super excited to be doing that because I'm doing it as a part of the Ironman Foundation. And like collectively, there's 8 of us doing it, and we're shooting to raise over $120,000, which will then be used to purchase bikes and swim lessons for local kids in South Africa, so they, have the freedom of mobility and are able to go to school and stuff like that. So super excited about doing that. That'll be in mid March, and then after that, I think kind of likely Ironman Texas, but some things are still up in the air though, especially with Cape Epic being so close to that. And then I will likely, kind of pursue the Pro Series again. So that would probably be like Happy Valley, Lake Placid. Um, and then, I don't necessarily know what the second 70.3 will be, and then Kona. So still very much kind of up in the air. I think if anything we've seen from the last 2 seasons with the Pro Series is that you kind of have a general idea of what you're gonna do, but you have to be really flexible, um, and and be ready to kind of pivot. Last year, the goal was to qualify for 70.3 Worlds at, St. George and then go to Marbella. But since I didn't do that, we kind of pivoted entirely. And, I was still a part of the Pro Series. I still finished 11th, but the focus was much more on Ironman distance racing in 2025, partially because of the cramping, and that's what I'm best at. And so sometimes you just kind of have to pivot away from what your initial goal is. But I think it still worked out pretty well for me. So,
So just so I have this straight, you're like this crazy person with all the stuff on the go. Time is always an issue, and so instead of going to a 1 day race, you're going to an 8 day race. Basically, not quite on the other side of the world, but almost.
yeah, I think it's one of those things where I wasn't necessarily intending on doing Cape Epic, but around a year ago, I was approached with doing it, and I think it's such kind of an iconic race. Like I'd never necessarily ever planned on doing it, but I recognized the incredible opportunity that I had in front of me, and so sometimes there are times where you just kind of have to send it and see what happens. Um, and that's pretty much what I'm doing, which I think will be super fun. And as long as I don't get injured during the race, I don't really think that there's any bad outcome to it. So,
Yeah, no, of course I'm being my normal facetious self, and I think that's awesome that that you're heading down there to do all that.
yeah, it'll be super cool. I've never been to South Africa before, so that will be fun, and I love to travel. So, who doesn't love a nice 15-hour flight? So,
Yeah.
um,
And
And
so will your mom be making the trip down there with you? We got to meet her in Nice and sort of see her keep the Matthew Marquardt train moving in the right
yes.
direction and coordinating everything.
Yeah, no. So this will be one thing that my mom won't be joining me with just because of the logistics of the race and whatnot. And Ironman Foundation is actually taking incredibly good care of me. That it doesn't necessarily make sense for her to come down. But she will of course be at any triathlon related events this coming year. So she's a huge, huge help. I think probably more so than any other pros. I really like lean on a team type mentality and in order to be able to do all these things. And my mom is certainly like a really, really big important part of that from logistics standpoint and as well as support and everything like that. So yeah, she's great and she loves to travel, so she gets a nice little perk out of it too. So
Awesome. Well, I feel like I've hogged tons of time. Eric and Ben, I know you guys have some questions for Matt as well.
I was wondering if you could just talk about, you mentioned the Cape Epic and you're raising money, but you do a lot of charity work. You work a lot with, is it Pelotonia?
hmm yep,
Yeah. So if you'd be able to talk about that, I'm sure people would
yeah.
love to hear that.
So one of the things, so I have I guess a long-ish history of doing athletic endeavors as a way to raise money and raise awareness for things, and that all started when I was a freshman in high school. I had a friend who was diagnosed with a pediatric blood cancer, and I ended up climbing Mount Kilimanjaro and raising money for Make a Wish for that, and that kind of really started, I think, my love for fundraising and for kind of supporting different organizations and initiatives through athletics. And Ironman's no different. Where when I started, kind of even before I was, a pro, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this sport, I want to do it with a bigger purpose, and have something, have a reason beyond just chasing results and chasing self-improvement. And I've had a lot of people in my life that have had cancer, and I want to become a cancer surgeon. And so cancer was obviously a very it was a no-brainer to kind of do a lot of my triathlon related things for that cause. And there's a special bike ride at at Ohio State in Columbus every year called Pelotonia, and there's about 7,500 people that do this bike ride every single year. And this past year, I believe just under $30 million was raised for cancer research at Ohio State. And over the 16 plus year history of this event, it's like $310 million, over that amount has been raised for cancer research at Ohio State. And so it's really awesome to be a part of such like an impactful organization, and to kind of be a part of this community. And so that's kind of what a lot of I do from a triathlon standpoint is raising money for cancer research and raising awareness about the importance of cancer research, because right now in particular, a lot of like research funding is getting cut. The vast majority, like it used to be that the vast majority of research funding came from the government, but over the last 20 years or so, it's become harder and harder to get funding. And so private philanthropy has really kind of had to step up in order to bridge that gap. And Peloton is a huge part of that in the Columbus area. And has led to research that's created new drugs, new surgical treatments, et cetera, that have had an impact, all over the world. So definitely something that I'm very passionate about and
Mhm.
love being a part of.
Yeah. And in Nice, I remember obviously we met with you, but we had met with like the Ironman team before we met with you, and they were talking about, yeah, and Matthew's going to a children's hospital. Like it's like nothing again. I mean, all the other pros are great, but like you're there, you're focused on the race, and then but I'm gonna take the time to go to this children's hospital, and it was a children's hospital, yeah.
It was a cancer hospital.
It was a cancer hospital.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
there in
different
Nice,
then.
there's a
Different.
a cancer specific hospital.
Mhm.
And I think Ironman and triathlon racing has provided me just so many incredible opportunities to see the world and experience other cultures. And
Mm,
um, I think in Ironman Cans in particular, the run course is you pass a hospital 8 times on the Cans run course.
mm,
And, like when I'm doing that, like I'm like, oh, like, there's patients in there. There are people that are, recovering from illness. There are people that are struggling with illness. There's kind of this whole spectrum of experiences that are going on in the hospital. And I wish that I had been able to kind of visit that hospital there and just kind of see what it's like, and, maybe visit some patients and, kind of provide a little hope and brighten their day of like, hey, there's this complete stranger from some random corner of the world that's come in and wanted to say hi. And so I kind of wanted to do the same thing when I was in Nice, because it's not every day that you get to see how healthcare works in another country. And those kind of experiences, like I'll be able to take with me for the rest of my life. So
mhm.
that's why I did it, even though, leading up
No,
to it.
yeah.
But
No, I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, yeah. No, it's
So
amazing.
so we all assume, we think, we believe that we are a part of a healthy lifestyle. But Matthew, you're like the only actual medical person here. Do you think we overdo it as Ironman athletes, or do you think we kind of not overdo it?
So it's a great question, and I'll try not to like go too much into things or for too long. But like everything's kind of a bell curve, a spectrum, whatever you want to call it. And I certainly think that there is a point, like a point within Ironman doing Ironman where it is very healthy. It's very good for you. But I think for pretty much any sport, honestly, when you're at an absolutely elite level, it starts to become actually unhealthy, for different reasons. And, not saying that like people shouldn't do Ironman. I think you very much should. I mean, the transformations that people have had in their health, their mental health, et cetera, by doing this sport is absolutely incredible. But what I've talked about in some of my like reels and whatnot is there's a difference between optimizing for health and optimizing for performance. And I'm very much optimizing for performance. And working, everyone should work out, every day or almost every day. But like when you start working out for 6 hours a day, that's putting a certain amount of stress on the body that can actually be counterproductive if health is defined in terms of just longevity. And so and that's happens regardless of sports, like other sports, maybe you're more inclined to like tear a tendon or tear a ligament or this, that, and, you might get like arthritis because of you're doing these repetitive motions over and over again. And so, like, yes, we're very healthy, but like, there's also aspects of any sport, honestly, that becomes unhealthy when you overdo it. So, that's kind of like my long and short answer of it is like, there is a part of Ironman that I think for the vast majority of people is very healthy. But I think for pretty much all like elite athletes, like pros in particular, like sport to an extent starts to become unhealthy. Again, depending on what your endpoint is, like there's all these different ways that you can define health. Um, so yeah, that's my simple answer to a complex question.
So, okay, so what I mean, do we like what are some of the recommendations that you have for somebody in the sport that's been doing it for like 25 years? Like, is it
Well, I mean, I certainly think that you very much should do it. I just don't think that you need to do 5 Ironmans and train for 25 hours a week.
yeah, 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 yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's very
I
much the
and
classic.
I
It's very
used to
much the
have this
classic
conversation.
moderation.
Yeah, I used to
Do
have this
things in
conversation
moderation type of a thing.
with Andy Potts all the
Uh-huh.
time when he, was like when he was in the middle of the race, he wasn't doing great and he was just pissed off, right? And he was just like, I'm just gonna fucking go, right? And he would like cross this is like a sprint race. It's not even he's not going for like prize money or anything. It was like lifetime fitness race. And he crossed the race in like, 10th or 11 and like he had no chance of like winning anything. And he's like sitting there and he's just like destroyed. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And then he like passed out, right? I'm just like, like you've only got so many of those things in your life before your body's just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
Yeah.
curious
So I
what your
mean,
opinion on was.
there's all different ways that you can look at certain things, and I think a lot of things with the human body when you provide a stimulus to it that's productive and beneficial, but like you can overdo it with anything. I mean, like you can drink too much water and that can kill you.
Yeah,
So with the human body, there's always such thing as too much of a good thing, regardless of the context. And I certainly think sport and exercise is certainly one of those.
yeah. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk to you about the drafting rules that are kind of in the media right now because you've done a really good job at using AI to come up with a lot of simulations on drafting and whatnot that is I feel like if somebody there's been some people on our forum, Talbot Cox, that loves to use Chat GTP and like throw some stuff down. You're just like, what kind of questions were you asking Chat to get that answer? But I feel like you've done a really good job and you've had a couple of other people really help you with that. But I'm kind of curious on maybe giving a little bit of background on who helped you with some of those studies, how you came up with your questions, and when did that really start for you of where you were the first one being like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm sick of everybody just saying, I'm going to come up
Yeah.
with try to come up with some sort of like real data.
Yeah. So, I think like the topic has really kind of started to pique my interest around the time of Kona last in 2024, where obviously there was a massive train of people, and I think the pro series has been phenomenal for many different reasons. The one consequence of it is that fields are much deeper now, and so you have more athletes that are coming out of the water together, and now all of a sudden you're getting these big trains. And it was just kind of, I think Kona particularly, and then earlier last season, it became very clear that like, hey, the way to win a race is to to sit in the group on the bike. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. That's within the rules. But I also didn't necessarily feel like that was kind of the spirit of the sport. Kind of Ironman's known as a non-drafting or a draft illegal sport, and
Individual.
is really kind of designed to. I feel like the spirit, the essence of the sport is who's the best across all three disciplines. And as things have gotten faster, as fields have gotten deeper, as any sport evolves, I felt like we were starting to lose a little bit of that. And it was almost, obviously it's not to the extent of ITU in Olympic, but it was becoming a little bit more of like, it's just coming down to the fastest racer. And I feel like one of the really phenomenal things about the history of Ironman is you used to have this kind of like give and take of, oh, someone's going to go off the front of the bike, like are they going to be able to hang on, or is the runner going to be able to like track them down,
Yes.
is the cyclist going to blow up or like hold on, type of a thing. And whereas now it's kind of like, okay, there's this big group on the bike, let's just see who can run the fastest. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. If Ironman decides that's what we want the future of the sport to be, then as an athlete, you have to adapt. But I felt like there was no, there was no kind of real um, consensus, or I don't know quite the right word, but like there was no kind of discussion on like, okay, what do we want the sport to actually be? Do we want the sport to be like where the bike really matters, or do we want the sport to be where it's more like just based on the run? And that's like kind of where I started to play with this. And people have said like, oh, like there's definitely a benefit, and I believe as an athlete who's experienced it, there's a benefit to sitting in the group at 12 meters, but also like your word versus my word, like that's not how decisions are made in medicine. And in research, we very much take a data first approach, which is why I kind of decided to kind of do like a simulation, and kind of see what would pop up. And there are lots of flaws with that simulation, but the whole point of it was like, hey, this is kind of what might be the might be happening. It's kind of lining up with what I feel like as an athlete I see. So like that gives it a little bit of credibility, but like more than anything else, like to spark the conversation and to kind of really kind of bring out into the open, like, hey, like there might be kind of this competitive advantage to sitting in a group versus not, and to really kind of, I don't want to say force Ironman to talk about it, but like force, I think, the whole community to really kind of come together and say like, okay, what do we want the future of this sport to look like, was really kind of, I think, the goal more so than anything.
So you're just to recap, you are kind of like, why, if this is non-drafting, why is there conversations of how to successfully stay in a pack before you
Yeah,
get to the
yeah,
run? Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And if this was truly non-drafting, why would the strategy, I think particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, why would the strategy, really start to shift towards like not attacking the bike, or maybe not attacking is the right way, but like just sitting in the back of the group and then running fast. Um, which again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fully within the rules, but like that's a shift in how kind of I think the sport, kind of has been. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I feel like as a community, we should agree if that's what we want,
Yeah.
you know, type of a
Yeah.
thing. And like the Tour de France is grappling with some problem with somewhat similar in that like the sport's getting faster, partially from technology, but partially from athletes as well. Um, and so they're trying to figure out ways to slow things down. I think Ironman, I don't think we need to worry about slowing things down. I think we just need to make the gap between cyclists bigger, because as you go faster, the slipstream behind an athlete gets longer. Um, so
Kevin, you're the most senior person here, and and
It
well,
just
you
keeps
are.
like getting in there. You're old, man.
No, you're right. You're right. You're the most senior person here, and you are the most person with the most experience when it comes to Ironman. Do you feel like the statement that Matthew just said over the last 18 months, where that's been kind of the theory, do you think that's an accurate statement, or has it always been that way, but because of social media and things like that, it just wasn't really talked about as much back in the day?
Whew. So I fear, um, that is a very complicated question, for a couple of reasons. So um, there have been times. So when you look at the, um, you know, early 2000s, you had the Norman Stadler years in Kona, right? Norman takes off. We sit at the press conference and we say to the guys, "Why did you let Norman get a 12-minute lead?" And Chris McCormick says, none of us let him take a lead. He just took off. Like we weren't sitting there going, oh, like, right. And so, but then you had this sort of that change. You get the Crowy era and all that kind of stuff where there's more of a group riding along, right? And so it's sort of had these different waves. What I feel has happened, and I think Matthew is sort of alluding to all of this, is that in as much as it's people are getting faster, it's people are getting better at all three levels of the sport. And so the big change now is that um, almost everybody, other than Sam Long and Lionel Sanders, who's a contender for the race, is coming out of the water within a minute of each other, right? Like,
Mhm.
and then they can all ride really well, right? Like, the days of somebody, you know, riding 12 minutes away, other than Sam Laidlow, are pretty much gone. And even Sam doesn't seem to be able to do that over the last 12 or 18 months, right? Like it seems like everybody has jumped up to yeah, Sam's not getting away like that anymore. So I think that's a long way of me kind of saying it's a bit of both. Like you look at, the Iron War, and I know no one ever wants me to talk about that in '89, but um, to a large extent, Mark Allen was marking Dave Scott all day. Like there wasn't a whole lot of time that Mark was in front of Dave on the bike. And there wasn't a whole lot of time that, Mark was pushing the pace. Well, they were both kind of pushing each other. But that was Dave knew that he needed to keep things moving. And Mark knew that he just needed to stay with Dave until it was time to go. Right. So I don't know if I answered that question or not, Eric.
And one other thing that I would say on that too is like, kind of with people getting away is I think one thing that people don't necessarily realize is that like when you're at the top level of Ironman, you're playing with a really small margin in terms of like if you look at power output, like you're really kind of toying this very tight window where if you go over, like you're gonna blow up on the run. And from my personal experience as an athlete, I think you just go like 10 watts over like what you're capable of, and your marathon's shot. And 10 watts is not a lot. And that was part of my kind of curiosity with doing some of these simulations is like, okay, what's the difference? Like, obviously, 20 meters is not going to have as much of a draft effect as 12, but like, what's the delta we're talking here? Is it 2 watts? Is it 10? Is it 30? Um, and from my personal opinion, like, I think if there's, you know, if there's more than a 10-watt delta, I think that has a significant impact to impact race dynamics because since everyone's gotten up to such a close level, like it's like that just extra 10 watts enables people to kind of stay in the pack that maybe wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And so then that's kind of how I personally feel like it impacts race dynamics, or like those 10 watts enable someone to stay in the pack and then run well versus kind of stay with everyone else, but then their marathon suffers. And so, that's kind of what I started to think about and see. And that's kind of why I wanted to like ask some of these questions through simulations and discussion with other people as well.
What's
Yeah.
kind of been your the feedback that you've gotten? Have you gotten any like hate mail and stuff like that?
um, no, for the most part, not.
No keyboard warriors coming after you?
Yeah, I mean, there have been some, but I don't know. You always kind of assume that there's going to be a couple of people, but I think overall, I feel like the conversation that at least has happened kind of in my channels of social media has been very constructive overall, where people have thrown out like different things. Maybe I don't necessarily agree with all of them, but I think it's always really important to hear different perspectives of people. Some people like, it should be time based. It should be, you know, some people brought up like, hey, like 20 meters is great, but like if you're not going to officiate 20 meters, it doesn't matter. And so there's like, there's things that I think people have brought up that I think have really kind of helped make me think differently about it. And like it's a simple thing, I think a lot of people oversimplify it. Switching from 12 to 20 is very simple. It's just telling everyone, it's a setting on Race Ranger, and it's telling someone that they basically have to ride 25 feet further back. But there's actually a whole host of other things that it impacts. Kevin and I have talked about this, like, the challenge that it might be to pass someone on a more complicated course. And so you kind of have to think through all of that. And, um, you know, it's a complicated course. But at the end of the day, honestly, my opinion is like it's pretty low stakes. So you might as well try it. And we can kind of think about these things all we want, and we can, debate back and forth like, oh, like, what about this? What about this? But like, you're not actually going to get any real data or real results or see how it actually impacts things unless you actually try it. And so that's kind of much more been my stance recently is like, hey, like, you know, if we go to 20 and like it's a logistical nightmare and it has no impact on race dynamics, then just switch it back to 12. It's just a couple strokes of the keyboard. So
Did Ironman ask you to be a part of any testing so far?
yeah, so I was asked to be a part of the testing that happened kind of in Tucson, but I was in the midst of exams, so I wasn't able to
Yeah.
make it. But yeah, no, they like, I wanted to, but like, kind of
Yeah.
there's some
What
other things that
the
had
the
to
med
happen.
school at Ohio State didn't feel like this was way more important than you write an exam. I just don't understand. This is
I
this
know.
is huge, man. This is
We
so
just
important.
we just need to do some testing in Ohio. Like, there's plenty
I
of
know.
cornfields out
Just
there.
come
Like,
just come out to me.
Uh, I'm not sure. What are the roads like? Are you doing a lot of outdoor riding in December in Ohio?
It all depends. It's completely crapshoot. So,
what did you think of the testing that was done?
I was fortunate in that they did kind of ask me kind of my opinion and to kind of go over the protocol with them. And I was very impressed with the protocol that they put together. And I think, I wasn't there to lay eyes on it, but like at least from the conversations that I had with them and in the plans and everything, I felt like they did, at least on paper, the best job that they could. The problem with any sort of testing like this, though, is like, you know, if you, this wasn't the case, but like if you have a 30-mile-per-hour crosswind, that's going to give you very different results than if you have a 30-mile-per-hour headwind versus no wind at all. So there are certain aspects that you can never really fully account for, or fully control for. But I think like from a scientific rigor standpoint, I think that at least on paper, everything was done really well. But I can't speak to how it was done actually in person. But
Would
yeah, I was
would
I was impressed.
would you have changed anything?
Um, no, honestly, I think like there were some things that I had questions about, but like I kind of provided a proposal to them like earlier on, and it followed very closely that proposal. That follows a lot of I think like scientific principles about repeatability and precision and accuracy and everything. So, I personally don't think that I would have changed anything. At least again based on like what was supposed to happen.
Okay, so this is gonna come across as a bait and switch, but it's not. Um, but I I do so in a lot of the simulations that you did
Mhm.
online, you went past 5 riders.
Correct.
They stuck at 5 riders.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think, with any sort of science, you have to balance like ideals versus feasibility. And like based on the simulations that I was running, you kind of started to get like decreasing benefits past 5 riders. Like you were still like rider 6, rider 7, rider 8 was seeing more of a draft benefit than rider 3, 4, 5. But like instead of it being, a bigger jump, like the jumps just became really, really small between rider after rider, and you kind of get this logarithmic graph. And so I think 5 was a good number to kind of balance feasibility of doing these tests with also like getting high quality data. So like yes, in an ideal world maybe you would have done 10, but the complexity of handling 10 athletes and rotating 10 athletes through, and the more athletes you have, then the more runs you have to do to like make sure that people are in different positions, And so I thought 5 was a pretty good number. And I certainly, if it had been less, I would have pushed for more. But I felt like 5 was fine. I don't necessarily think 6 or 7 would have really significantly impacted the results. So
Is that one of the reasons why you think that moving to like a 20-meter draft zone like rule would be so significant is because 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 position currently in the 12, like they're just really not getting that much advantage?
so no, so what I mean by that is, so if you compare the basically the drafting benefit
Yep,
or the aerodynamic drag that rider 1 versus rider 2 has. Of course,
yep,
that's a big jump.
yep,
So I'm just gonna make up some numbers here. Like, it's about at if I remember correctly, if you're at 12 meters, rider 2 is basically seeing a 15-watt benefit compared to rider 1. Rider 3 is seeing, like, a 16-watt benefit compared to rider 1. Rider 4 is seeing, like, a 17 or an 18-watt benefit compared to rider 1. Rider 5 is seeing, like, a 20-watt benefit compared to rider 1, and then, like, rider 6 is, like, 20.5 watts. Rider 7's, like, 21 watts. Rider 8's, like, 21.2 watts. So,
right.
like,
So it keeps getting stronger from a
yeah,
benefit perspective the
correct,
further it goes back.
correct. But
And in a
But
20-meter, you don't get that as much.
yeah, and, like, so in 20 meters, it's like you get, like, a 5-watt benefit if you're rider 2, and then it's, like,
Yeah.
5.5-watt benefit if you're 3, 5.6 watt if you're, like, rider 4. And
So
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 yeah.
hence, if you move to a 20-meter draft rule, the guys that are 7, 8, 9, 10 position, because they're saving so much watts now, potentially, if they move to a 20, they'll just pop off the back.
I think that's highly likely, and I think, like, one of the things that people need to realize is that, like, some of these if 20 meters were to happen, you're still probably gonna see large packs in the beginning of the race, but those packs are gonna break up more quickly, and they'll break up more significantly by the end of the bike. So, like, anyone can ride well the first half of an Ironman or the first half of a half Ironman, but really kind of those changes in aerodynamic drag will really become apparent during the second half of the bike leg. And so
It's like the
I think with
Javi effect.
yeah, yeah, like very much so. And so I
I mean,
think that,
because
we
yeah, I mean, it is I mean, in Hawaii, it's significantly different when on the back half of that. I mean, as soon as
right.
that climb goes up to Javi, it's you know who's on and who's not.
Yeah. And again, like people when you're at 20 meters, people probably will have to burn a couple more matches earlier on in the race, and that will come back to bite them during the second half of the ride. In those matches, they might not have had to burn at 12 meters.
Do you think it benefits somebody like Sam Long or Lionel Sanders?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like, I think you can make an argument that it benefits lots of people except for just the pure runners. It benefits the slow swimmers that are strong cyclists, it benefits the strong swim bikers, it benefits just the people that are just really good at cycling. Um, and so yeah, I think I think that there's but I think, more than anything, I think it creates, and Kevin and I have talked about, kind of this idea of fairness before, but I think it creates this kind of feeling of more of a level playing field. Like at 12 meters, everyone is under the same rules. They're playing by the same rules, but at the end of the day, like if you're Sam Long and you're in the back and you're riding alone, like you have to ride harder to catch up to the people that are in the group, and maybe they're rotating, and so they're not necessarily using quite as much energy kind of overall to go the same speed. And so, like, I think that, yeah, it does benefit someone like Lionel or Sam, and but I don't have any problems with that. I think honestly that just makes it more interesting because again,
Yep.
like it's this suspense of like, oh, are the slow swimmers going to be able to catch up to the cyclists? Whereas right now, like they're just basically out of the race from the get go. So
Mhm.
I
I'm
kind of
done
feel like
done
you're able.
interrogating you.
Well, no, I was just gonna just say, and I wonder your thoughts on this, Matthew, and don't take this the wrong way, but you're in a really interesting situation. You've got all this scientific background, but being a pro triathlete isn't your only gig. So you've got a big stake in all of this, but you also don't in some ways. And so
Yeah.
do you feel like you're
Yes, he
truly
does,
able
Kevin.
to.
This is how he's paying off his medical debt.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
yeah,
true.
but it's but I kind of feel like, everything he's talking about, I'm going, yeah, like this is a guy who, yeah, obviously it's a huge deal for him, but he's also like a lot of pros have to look at things is what's best for me. And I feel like what Matthew's talking about is what's best for the sport. I don't know.
Yeah.
If I'm throwing things into your or making things up or whatever, whatever you think, Matt.
No, I mean, I think I've very much tried to take that approach. Was like, okay, what's gonna be the best for the sport overall? Because like, um, as I said earlier, like I hope that I'm in the sport for a long time, but like I take it a year at a time, and so like it's kind of hard to say exactly how far I'll be in the sport. And I think more so than anything else, though, is like, I'm not saying this in a condescending way or whatnot, but like in the grand scheme of life, like 12 versus 20 meters really doesn't matter. Um, like when
No,
you're
it really doesn't.
when
Yeah.
you're dealing with people that are sick, that are dying, like 12 versus 20, like it really doesn't matter. And so like and also at the end of the day, a sport is never 100% equal. Like it's not. And so at the end of the day, like Ironman's going to make a decision about, we want this rule because we want the sport to look this way. And as an athlete, like maybe that benefits me, maybe that doesn't. But like there's other rules that benefit different athletes in a different way than me, for example. Like just like the same way that like we had world championships at Nice versus Kona that benefits a different type of an athlete. And you have to adapt to that. And that's what sport's all about. And so I kind of very much view the 12 versus 20 rule as the same way as like, hey, I would love it to be 20 meters. I think it's best for the sport that it's 20 meters, but also at the end of the day, like things aren't necessarily always going to be exactly how I want it. And as I said before, like in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. So, uh,
Yeah. I really appreciate you taking all this time, Matt. I just have one thing that I've been dying to ask. Do you see yourself still doing triathlons in 20 years? Like when you're doing, instead of 5 to 10 hours of training every day, you're spending 12 to 14 in an operating room or whatever. Like, do you still see yourself doing tries?
Yeah, I certainly think like I think being active is very much a part of who I am and kind of a part of the lifestyle that I love. I love being outside. I love working out. I think that it's a really, really good way to de-stress and to cope with a lot of different things is by working out. And so I certainly think that being active will very much be a part of my kind of day to day. And I think that I think triathlon certainly will have a spot in there. But I think that there's probably going to be ebbs and flows. There's going to be time during my training and my career um, that maybe I can do a little bit more triathlon, but there's also going to be times where maybe I have to take a pause for a year or two. And that's also just life. Like, we can't necessarily do everything that we want at all the time. And so, but yeah, no, it's certainly very much a part of who I am and kind of the lifestyle I live. And I think I will be part of it in some capacity, but exactly how that looks, I think is very much to be determined.
That's awesome. Hey, we really appreciate you taking the time from an insanely busy schedule and hope that we haven't taken away too much TV time for you and Sarah later on tonight or whatever. Hopefully you can watch the football game or something. So really appreciate it. He's Matthew Marquardt. We had Eric Wynn and Ben Snyder McGrath. I'm Kevin McKinnon. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Slow Twitch podcast, and we will look forward to chatting at you again next week.
This episode is brought to you by Good Life Nutrition, developed by athletes like you. Whether you are looking for race day nutrition, daily electrolytes, or your daily protein, Good Life Nutrition has you covered. Built on science and backed by common sense, it's why professional athletes like Ben Canute, Jason West, and many others have made the switch. Enjoy 25% off your first order by using promo code Slowtwitch. Just go to fuelyourgoodlife.com and use promo code Slowtwitch.